He arrived carrying a handmade crib, expecting to meet his granddaughter for the first time. Instead, his daughter-in-law smirked and said, "She was born 11 weeks ago." What began as one innocent question uncovered forged documents, hidden lies, and a family betrayal no one saw coming. Before we begin, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more emotional family stories filled with shocking twists and unforgettable endings. My name is Selim Voss, and until that afternoon I believed disappointment always arrived with warning signs. I was wrong. Sometimes it arrived quietly, wearing a polite smile, waiting for a single innocent question before turning your entire world upside down. Looking back now, I realize the answer I received that day didn't simply reveal a secret. It exposed months of carefully planned deception that would forever change the way I viewed my own family. I was 63 years old and had spent most of my life solving structural problems. As a structural engineer, I trusted measurements, evidence, and logic. Buildings either stood or collapsed for reasons that could be explained. Families, I had always believed, followed the same principle. Tell the truth, respect each other, and everything eventually found its balance. Life proved me wrong after my wife, Alira, passed away 4 years earlier. Her absence left a silence inside our home that no amount of work or hobbies could ever replace. Fortunately, my only son, Orion, remained close. We spoke every week, shared dinners every month, and celebrated every birthday together. When he married Narissa Quill 2 years earlier, I welcomed her with complete sincerity. She was intelligent, organized, and remarkably confident. Although she often appeared emotionally distant, I assumed she simply needed time to become comfortable around our family. Then, nearly 8 months before everything collapsed, Orion called me with wonderful news. "Dad," he said, his voice shaking with excitement, "you're going to be a grandfather." I still remember sitting in my kitchen after hanging up the phone. I laughed aloud even though nobody else was there. For the first time since losing Alira, I felt the future pulling me forward instead of reminding me what I had lost. From that day forward, I prepared for my granddaughter with enthusiasm that surprised even me. I restored an old wooden rocking horse that had belonged to Orion when he was little. I repainted a small crib I had built decades earlier. Every weekend I visited bookstores searching for children's stories that my wife had once read to our son. I imagined teaching my granddaughter how to build birdhouses, how to grow tomatoes in the backyard, and how to fix a bicycle when she became old enough. Months passed. Whenever I asked Orion about doctor appointments, his answers became strangely brief. "Everything's fine, Dad." Whenever I asked if they needed help preparing the nursery, Narissa politely declined. "We've already handled everything." When I offered to assemble furniture or babysit after the birth, she smiled and replied, "We'll let you know." I noticed the distance growing, but I refused to pressure them. Every generation approached parenthood differently. Privacy wasn't rejection, I told myself. Young couples simply wanted space. Still, something felt unusual. My neighbors frequently asked how the pregnancy was progressing, and I realized I knew almost nothing. I had never seen an ultrasound photo. I had never attended a family dinner celebrating the baby. Even simple updates became increasingly rare. Orion often sounded distracted whenever we spoke. Sometimes our conversations lasted less than 2 minutes before he claimed another appointment demanded his attention. Looking back, the warning signs had been there all along. I simply refused to believe my own son would hide something so important from me. 3 weeks later, I decided to stop waiting for invitations. I packed the restored rocking horse into my truck, placed the freshly painted crib carefully in the back, and drove across town to Orion and Narissa's house. The afternoon sunlight reflected against their windows as I parked outside. My heart was full of excitement. I imagined surprising them with handmade gifts, and perhaps helping organize the nursery before my granddaughter arrived. I rang the doorbell. After nearly a minute, the front door opened. Narissa stood there wearing a calm expression that revealed nothing. "Oh," she said softly, "you're here." There was no smile, no excitement, no invitation. Only hesitation. Then Orion appeared behind her. His face looked unusually pale, and instead of greeting me with his usual hug, he merely nodded before stepping aside. I carried the rocking horse inside anyway, convincing myself they were simply tired. The living room looked spotless. Too spotless. Then my eyes stopped on something near the fireplace. A baby blanket. Next to it sat a tiny bottle. Beside the couch rested a folded stroller. For a brief moment I smiled. Perhaps the baby had arrived early. Perhaps today would become the happiest day of my life. I turned toward Nerissa with genuine excitement and asked the simplest question imaginable. So, when is my granddaughter due? She looked directly into my eyes. Then she smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, almost as if she had been waiting for me to ask. Due, she repeated. She slowly folded her arms before delivering the sentence that shattered everything I believed I knew. Selim. She was born 11 weeks ago. For several seconds I couldn't answer. My mind rejected the words before my ears could fully process them. 11 weeks. My granddaughter had been alive for nearly 3 months, and I had spent every one of those days believing she was still waiting to be born. My hands tightened around the handle of the wooden rocking horse until my knuckles turned white. I searched Orion's face, hoping he would laugh awkwardly and admit this had all been some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, he looked down at the floor as though the grain of the hardwood had suddenly become fascinating. That silence hurt more than Nerissa's words ever could. I'm sorry, I finally whispered. What did you just say? Nerissa leaned casually against the kitchen counter, completely composed. She was born 11 weeks ago. Healthy delivery. Everything went well. I stared at her. And nobody thought to tell me? She shrugged. We made a decision. I turned toward Orion. A decision? He rubbed the back of his neck without meeting my eyes. We thought it would be easier. Easier for who? I asked. Neither of them answered. The room suddenly felt unfamiliar. I had visited this house dozens of times before, but now every object seemed to accuse me of missing moments I could never recover. A tiny pink blanket rested over the arm of the sofa. A stuffed rabbit sat neatly beside an infant carrier. Family photographs lined the bookshelf, each one capturing smiles, celebrations, and milestones from which I had been completely erased. One photograph caught my attention. It showed Orion holding a newborn wrapped in white while Nerissa smiled proudly beside him. The picture was framed. Not temporary. Not recent. It had clearly been displayed for weeks. My granddaughter's first family portrait existed without me ever knowing she had taken her first breath. I walked toward the bookshelf and picked up the frame with trembling hands. She has your mother's eyes, I said quietly. Neither of them spoke. I kept looking at the tiny face in the photograph, searching for pieces of the family I thought I still belonged to. What is her name? This time Orion answered. Lyra. I smiled despite everything. That's beautiful. Another silence followed. I realized they hadn't even intended for me to learn her name today. The realization settled heavily inside my chest. I could have helped, I said softly. I wasn't expecting to move into your house. I just wanted to be part of her life. Nerissa crossed her arms. That's exactly what we wanted to avoid. I slowly turned toward her. What does that mean? She inhaled calmly, almost rehearsing her next sentence. You have very strong opinions. You tend to involve yourself in family decisions. We wanted to establish our own routines before anyone else influenced them. I've never forced my opinions on either of you. You don't have to, she replied. People naturally listen to you. We didn't want outside expectations. Outside. The word echoed in my mind. Outside. After raising Orion alone during the hardest years of my life, after helping pay for his college education, after spending decades believing family meant showing up whenever you were needed, I had become an outsider. I looked at my son again. Do you agree with this? His hesitation lasted only a second, but it felt endless. We talked about it together. The answer landed like a stone. Not because he had spoken, because he had chosen those words. We. Together. As though hiding the birth of my granddaughter had been discussed over coffee and quietly approved. I carefully placed the framed photograph back onto the shelf. I kept calling, I said. I know, Orion replied. I asked about appointments. I know. I built her a crib. His face finally changed. Confusion replaced guilt. What? It's in my truck. Neither of them moved. I restored your old rocking horse too. Still nothing. Every hour I had spent sanding wood, applying fresh paint, and imagining my granddaughter's future suddenly felt painfully naive. I wasn't preparing for her arrival. I had been preparing for an invitation that was never coming. Without another word, I walked outside. The afternoon air felt colder than before. I opened the truck and looked at the carefully wrapped crib resting beside the rocking horse. For several minutes I simply stood there. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I assumed it was Orion. Instead it was Nerissa. She stopped several feet away. "You can leave those if you want," she said. I looked at her in disbelief. "Leave them. They'll still be useful." Useful. Not meaningful. Not appreciated. Useful. I slowly closed the tailgate. "No," I answered quietly. "These were built for my granddaughter by someone who expected to know her." For the first time since I had arrived, Nerissa's expression hardened. "If you're going to make this emotional, it's only going to prove we made the right decision." I climbed into my truck without responding. As I drove away, I caught one final glimpse of Orion standing silently in the doorway, watching me leave without making any effort to stop me. I didn't know it then, but the greatest betrayal wasn't that they had hidden Lyra's birth. The greatest betrayal was that someone had spent months making sure I appeared absent by choice. And within a few days, a phone call from a complete stranger would expose the first crack in the lie they believed would never be questioned. For the next 4 days I barely left my house. The restored rocking horse remained in my garage, covered by the same blanket I had wrapped around it before driving to Orion's home. Every time I walked past it, I imagined a little girl laughing as she learned to balance on it. Instead, it stood untouched, reminding me that I had become a stranger before I even had the chance to become a grandfather. Friends called to check on me, but I ignored most of their messages. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened because I still couldn't explain it to myself. Families argued. Families disagreed. But they didn't simply erase one another. At least that was what I had believed for 63 years. On the 5th morning, my phone rang while I was making coffee. The caller ID displayed an unfamiliar number. Normally I would have let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Mr. Selim Voss? Speaking. My name is Dr. Morel Casta. I oversee several family outreach programs at the Brookhaven Parenting Resource Center. Is this a convenient time?" I frowned. "I suppose so. I'm sorry to bother you unexpectedly, but I wanted to clarify something regarding your granddaughter." The coffee mug nearly slipped from my hand. "My granddaughter?" "Yes. Lyra." Hearing her name from a complete stranger felt surreal. I wasn't aware anyone from the Parenting Resource Center knew who I was. There was a brief pause. "According to our records, you've been participating since before Lyra was born." I stared across my kitchen. "I'm sorry, what?" "Our files indicate you attended orientation, signed emergency contact documents, and voluntarily declined scheduled visitation opportunities." For several seconds I forgot how to breathe. "I've never been inside your building." Another silence followed. When Dr. Casta spoke again, her tone had completely changed. "Mr. Voss, are you telling me you never signed any paperwork?" "I've never signed anything related to my granddaughter." "And you've never attended one of our workshops?" "No." She inhaled sharply. "Would you be willing to come by our office today?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Brookhaven Parenting Resource Center occupied a renovated brick building on the opposite side of town. The lobby was welcoming, decorated with children's artwork, colorful bookshelves, and comfortable chairs where several young parents sat quietly with sleeping infants. Watching them interact with their babies made the ache inside my chest even heavier. A receptionist escorted me upstairs to Dr. Casta's office. She greeted me with an apologetic smile. "I appreciate you coming." "So do I," I answered. "Because right now nothing makes sense." She opened a locked cabinet and removed a thick folder. Across the front, in bold lettering, was my last name. "Voss family. I'd like you to examine these documents." She handed me the first page. At the bottom appeared my signature. At least it looked like my signature. Except I had never seen the document before. The second page carried another signature. Then another. And another. Some forms confirmed I had attended educational sessions. Others stated I preferred limited involvement with my granddaughter. One document claimed I had formally requested that all communication regarding Lyra go directly through Orion and Nerissa. Every signature looked convincing. Every signature was fake. I felt my pulse quicken. These aren't mine. Dr. Casta nodded slowly. I suspected as much after speaking with you. She slid another sheet toward me. This attendance record shows you participated in 3 separate family workshops. I examined the dates. One of them listed me as attending on a Saturday afternoon. I remembered that day perfectly. I had been nearly 200 miles away attending my former engineering firm's retirement banquet. Another date showed me participating in a parenting seminar. That same morning I had been volunteering at the community library's annual book drive. I could prove exactly where I had been. Someone hadn't merely forged my name. They had invented an entirely different version of my life. Who submitted these? I asked quietly. Dr. Casta hesitated. The paperwork arrived electronically through the family's registration account. Nerissa handled all of that? According to our records. Yes. I leaned back in my chair trying to absorb what I was seeing. Keeping me away from Lyra had been painful enough. Someone had taken deliberate steps to make it appear that I had willingly abandoned my own granddaughter. That wasn't family conflict. That was planning. Dr. Casta folded her hands. I haven't reported this yet. I looked up. Why not? Because if these documents are fraudulent, I wanted to be absolutely certain before accusing anyone. She reached into the folder once more and removed a small envelope. There's something else. Inside were printed benefit summaries tied to the same application file. I quickly noticed several sections highlighted in yellow. Extended family involvement. None. Emergency support network. None. Grandparent participation. Declined. Every answer painted the same picture. Lyra supposedly had no active grandparents. No extended support. No family beyond her parents. It wasn't just inaccurate. It had been carefully constructed. Dr. Casta looked directly at me. Mr. Voss, I believe someone wanted our organization to think your granddaughter was growing up without you. I lowered my eyes to the stack of forged papers covering the desk. Until that moment, I believed I had uncovered the entire betrayal. Instead, I was only holding the first pieces of something far larger. And somewhere behind those false signatures, someone had a reason worth risking everything to hide. I drove home from the Brookhaven Parenting Resource Center with copies of every document locked inside a folder on the passenger seat. During the entire drive, I kept glancing at it whenever I stopped at a traffic light. The forged signatures looked so convincing that even I might have believed they were authentic if I hadn't known the truth. Whoever had prepared those forms had studied the way I signed my name. That realization unsettled me more than anything else. This wasn't a careless mistake. It was deliberate. That evening I called Orion. He answered after the 6th ring. Hi, Dad. His voice sounded cautious. I need to ask you something. Okay. Did you ever see paperwork from Brookhaven Parenting Resource Center? There was a pause. I remember Nerissa filling out forms online. Why? Were you present when they were submitted? I don't think so. Did you ever sign anything? I signed 1 or 2 electronic forms she emailed me. I didn't really read all of them. I closed my eyes. Did you ever sign my name? What? Of course not. His answer came so quickly that I believed him. Then someone else did. Silence. What are you talking about? I'll explain later. Before he could ask another question, I ended the call. I wasn't interested in arguing over the phone. I wanted evidence first. The next morning, Dr. Morel Casta contacted me again. I've been reviewing the application history, she said. There's more information you should see. An hour later, I returned to Brookhaven. This time another man was waiting in the conference room. He stood as I entered and extended his hand. My name is Leander Sloan. His handshake was firm but calm. I'm an independent compliance investigator. Brookhaven occasionally asks me to review irregular cases involving financial documentation. Dr. Casta gestured toward the chair beside him. I asked Mr. Sloan to examine your file after our conversation yesterday. Leander opened a laptop and projected several documents onto a large monitor. I compared every signature attributed to you. He clicked to another image. Then another. They're nearly identical. I nodded. They fooled me at first. Exactly, he replied. That's the problem. He enlarged my signature from one document until it filled half the screen. Then he placed another beside it. The two signatures overlapped perfectly. Every curve, every angle, every tiny hesitation in the pen stroke. Perfect. Too perfect. No one signs their name exactly the same way every single time, Leander explained. Natural handwriting changes slightly. He overlaid 6 more signatures, each matched with impossible precision. They weren't individually written. I frowned. They were copied. He nodded. Digitally reproduced. The room became very quiet. Dr. Casta leaned forward. If someone scanned your signature once, they could paste it onto every future document. Leander opened another folder. I searched older public records connected to your family. He displayed documents from nearly 7 years earlier. I immediately recognized them. Mortgage refinancing papers. Orion and I had both signed them when helping transfer ownership of my late wife's vacation cabin. Leander pointed toward my signature. This appears to be the original source. I felt my stomach tighten. Someone had taken a legitimate legal document from years earlier and reused my signature without permission. Can you determine who accessed it? I asked. Not yet. He changed slides again. This is where the situation becomes more interesting. A spreadsheet appeared. Rows of dates, payments, approvals, program categories. Several entries were highlighted. Brookhaven partners with other nonprofit organizations, Leander explained. Families may qualify for childcare grants, home support funds, educational counseling, transportation assistance, and early childhood development programs. I nodded. I understand. What determines eligibility often depends on family circumstances. He highlighted another section. Applicants reporting little or no extended family support received additional consideration because they lacked volunteer caregivers. Then he clicked another document. Narissa's application. Every relevant question had been answered the same way. No active grandparents. No emergency relatives. No available family assistance. Minimal outside support. Everything matched the forged paperwork. I looked toward Dr. Casta. How much assistance are we talking about? She answered quietly. It varies. Leander spoke before she continued. In this case, he typed several commands. A total appeared at the bottom of the spreadsheet. Nearly $83,000 spread across multiple programs over the previous year. I stared at the number. You're telling me? He nodded. If grandparents were actively involved, several benefits either decreased substantially or became unavailable altogether. Suddenly every conversation with Narissa replayed inside my mind. Her refusal to let me help. Her insistence that they didn't need babysitting. Her determination to keep me invisible. It had never been about parenting styles. It had never been about privacy. My presence threatened the financial narrative she had created. Dr. Casta folded her hands. We still don't know whether Orion understood how these applications were completed. I don't think he did, I admitted. But ignorance won't erase what's happened. Leander closed the laptop. I agree. He slid a business card across the table. I'll continue tracing every submission connected to these files. As I picked up the card, my phone vibrated. The screen displayed Orion's name. I answered immediately. His breathing sounded uneven. Dad. What happened? I found something in Narissa's desk while looking for tax records. What was it? His voice dropped to barely a whisper. A folder labeled Grandparent Strategy. Every muscle in my body froze. Before I could ask another question, Orion spoke again. You need to come over. I arrived at Orion's house less than 20 minutes after his phone call. The same driveway where I had stood weeks earlier now felt completely different. Back then I had arrived carrying gifts and hope. This time, I carried a folder full of forged documents and questions that demanded answers. Orion opened the front door before I even reached it. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, and he looked as though he hadn't slept all night. Dad, he said quietly, stepping aside. I entered without speaking. The house was unusually silent. Lyra was asleep upstairs, according to Orion, while Narissa had gone shopping after they argued earlier that morning. We sat at the dining table where a thick brown folder rested between us. He pushed it toward me. I found this hidden behind some financial files. I opened it carefully. Across the front page someone had typed 3 words. Grandparent Strategy Plan. My stomach tightened. Inside were printed checklists, schedules, application timelines, notes written in Narissa's handwriting. The first page contained a heading that immediately caught my attention. Maintain independent household status. Below it appeared several bullet points. Avoid regular grandparent visits before benefit approval. Do not list Selim as emergency support. Delay introductions until all funding decisions are finalized. Document limited family involvement. Every sentence felt colder than the last. This can't be real, Orion whispered. I kept reading. Another page outlined responses for interviews with nonprofit caseworkers. If asked about extended family, explain that grandfather prefers privacy. If questioned about childcare, state that no relatives are available. Emphasize emotional independence. Everything had been rehearsed. Everything had been prepared. This wasn't spontaneous, I said quietly. No. It was planned months before Lyra was born. Orion buried his face in his hands. I never saw any of this. I believed him. His confusion no longer resembled guilt. It resembled someone discovering that his own marriage had been built on carefully selected truths. Then another envelope slipped from the folder. Inside was a flash drive. Orion picked it up. I almost threw this away. Do you know what's on it? He nodded slowly. I found out yesterday. He walked to the television and connected the drive. A video recording appeared. It wasn't security footage from inside the house as I expected. Instead, it showed audio waveforms captured by one of Orion's home office recording devices. I bought this recorder to dictate work notes, he explained. Sometimes I accidentally leave it running. The recording began. For several seconds there was only background noise. Then Narissa's voice became clear. She was talking to someone on the phone. I've already handled Selim. A woman's voice answered from the other end, but it was too faint to understand. Narissa continued. He still thinks the baby isn't due yet. A short laugh followed. It sounds cruel, but he'll survive. I felt my chest tighten. The recording continued. If he starts showing up too often, people will ask questions. Once funding is approved, it won't matter anymore. There was another pause. Then came the sentence that explained everything. As long as everyone believes we have no family support, nobody will review the applications too closely. The room fell silent after the recording ended. Neither Orion nor I spoke for several moments. Finally he looked at me. I had no idea. His voice cracked. I swear to you. I nodded slowly. I know. For the first time since this nightmare had begun, I truly believed my son had been manipulated almost as thoroughly as I had. His mistake wasn't creating the deception. His mistake was trusting someone who convinced him not to ask questions. A car door slammed outside. Orion looked toward the window. Narissa's home. Within seconds the front door opened. She stepped inside carrying grocery bags before stopping abruptly. Her eyes moved from Orion, to me, to the open folder, to the paused recording on the television. For the first time since I had known her, genuine panic crossed her face. What are you doing? She demanded. Orion stood. I should be asking you that. She placed the grocery bags on the floor without answering. He pointed toward the television. I heard everything. Her expression hardened almost instantly. It isn't what you think. I spoke before Orion could answer. Then explain the forged signatures. She looked directly at me. I was protecting my family. By pretending I abandoned my granddaughter? You wouldn't understand. I understand perfectly. I lifted the stack of copied documents from the table. You didn't hide Lyra because you were afraid of me. I held up the benefit summaries. You hid me because I threatened your story. Her confidence finally began to crack. You don't know how expensive raising a child is. No, I replied calmly. I know exactly how expensive dishonesty becomes. Orion stared at her. Did you forge my father's signature? She didn't answer. Did you? Still nothing. That silence became her confession. Orion slowly reached into his pocket, removed his phone, and dialed a number. "Who are you calling?" Nerissa asked, suddenly alarmed. He never looked away from her. "Leander Sloan." Then he added words I never imagined hearing from my own son. "I think it's time the investigators see everything." Nerissa took one step backward. For the first time, she realized the lie she had spent nearly a year constructing was no longer under her control. And by the end of that week, every document she believed would protect her future would become the evidence that destroyed it. The investigation moved faster than I expected. 2 days after Orion contacted Leander Sloan, officials from the Nonprofit Oversight Office requested interviews with everyone connected to the applications. They didn't arrive with dramatic speeches or flashing cameras. They arrived carrying folders, laptops, and a simple objective. They wanted facts. After months of lies, facts were exactly what I had been waiting for. I met Leander outside the Brookhaven Parenting Resource Center before my scheduled interview. "You holding up?" he asked. "I've had better weeks." He nodded. "I won't promise outcomes, but I can promise the evidence is strong." Inside the conference room sat representatives from several organizations that had approved financial assistance over the previous year. Each agency had received nearly identical information claiming Orion and Nerissa had no meaningful support from extended family. My forged signatures had reinforced that narrative, making every application appear consistent. One investigator slid a document across the table. "Mr. Voss, can you confirm whether this signature belongs to you?" I looked at it for only a second. "No." She placed another document beside it. "And this one?" "No." A third. "No." The process continued for nearly an hour. Every answer remained the same. When the interviews concluded, Leander quietly informed me that digital forensic specialists had traced the uploaded application files to a personal computer registered in Orion and Nerissa's home office. More importantly, login records showed the submissions had been completed using Nerissa's individual account credentials, while Orion was at work on multiple occasions. That afternoon Orion called me. "They've questioned both of us." "How did it go?" I told them everything. His voice sounded tired, but for the first time in months it also sounded honest. I admitted I signed documents without reading them. I admitted I ignored warning signs. But I also gave them the recording and the strategy folder. I appreciated his honesty. Taking responsibility would never erase what had happened, but it was the first genuine step toward rebuilding trust. A week later the findings became official. Every forged signature was confirmed. Every fraudulent declaration regarding family support was documented. Every financial award connected to false information was reviewed. Several grants remained valid because they were based on income rather than family circumstances. Others were immediately revoked. Funds obtained through inaccurate declarations were ordered to be repaid over time. Civil fraud penalties followed soon afterward. Nerissa denied intentional wrongdoing until investigators presented the recording alongside the planning documents. Only then did her attorney begin negotiating a settlement. Criminal charges were ultimately avoided because full cooperation, repayment agreements, and the absence of previous offenses influenced the final decision. Even so, the consequences were substantial. Nerissa was permanently barred from participating in multiple family assistance programs that required verified declarations of need. Her professional reputation suffered, and several consulting contracts quietly disappeared after the case became known within local nonprofit circles. Some people later asked whether I felt satisfied watching her face those consequences. The truth surprised even me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted. No investigation could return Lyra's first smile. No repayment could replace the first 11 weeks of her life that I had missed forever. Justice can correct records. It cannot restore lost time. About a month after the investigation ended, Orion arrived at my house carrying a small car seat. Inside it sat Lyra. She had grown noticeably since the only photographs I had seen. She looked around my living room with wide, curious eyes before focusing on me. For a moment I hesitated. Would she cry? Would I feel like a stranger? Instead, she stretched out one tiny hand toward my face. I carefully offered my finger. She wrapped her entire hand around it and laughed. Such a simple sound, Yet it broke something inside me that had been frozen since the day I learned she existed. Orion smiled sadly. I'm sorry, Dad. I know. I can't change what happened. No. But I want to change what happens next. That sentence mattered more than any apology. Over the following months we built new routines instead of dwelling on the old ones. Every Saturday became our tradition. Orion brought Lyra to my house early in the morning. We read picture books, stacked colorful wooden blocks across the living room floor, and spent hours in the backyard where I eventually gave her the rocking horse I had restored before she was born. Watching her laugh while riding it erased a little more of the pain each week. Dr. Morel Casta remained a trusted friend long after the investigation ended. She often joked that the first honest paperwork she ever processed for our family was the easiest file she had completed all year. Leander visited occasionally, usually bringing small puzzles or children's books for Lyra. Without either of them, the truth might never have surfaced. As for Nerissa, she moved to another state after the legal matters concluded. Orion and she eventually divorced through a quiet agreement centered on shared parenting responsibilities. Their separation wasn't caused by one mistake alone. It was the result of trust that had been weakened until nothing stable remained. Even after everything that happened, I never celebrated the end of their marriage. Families falling apart are never reasons for joy, especially when children are involved. Looking back now, I understand something I once overlooked. Lies rarely begin with enormous crimes. They begin with small decisions that seem convenient in the moment. One omission becomes another. One false statement demands a second. Eventually the lie grows so large that the truth becomes impossible to hide without everything collapsing. I asked one simple question. When is my granddaughter due? The answer uncovered forged signatures, fabricated records, hidden financial motives, and a betrayal I never imagined possible. But it also revealed something stronger than deception. Truth still has allies. Sometimes they are strangers willing to ask difficult questions. Sometimes they are investigators who refuse to ignore inconsistencies. Sometimes they are family members who finally choose honesty over comfort.